So what we have discussed so far with chapter 5. So we are introduced to the gas, okay? The different empirical gas laws. You have Boyle's law, which relate pressure with volume. You have Charles' law, which relate temperature versus volume. And then you have the Avogadro's law, which usually relate, okay, the molarity with temperature and pressure that we have. All we know is out of this, we end up with the ideal gas law. So which in short tells us that gases that usually has four properties, if you have three of them, you should be able to determine the fourth property. And out of them, you can get a constant relationship. So in the ideal gas law, we could say this is just the summation of all the empirical natural gas laws that we have. And the way I told you to do how to do it is just imagine them like this. So if you want to derive the Boyle's law, the other factors that you have there will be constant. So if they're constant in initial and final temperature, they just be canceling out because they just be equals to 1. And from that, you can derive the Boyle's law, which is just like this. The Charles law. So Boyle's law, these are the one that is constant. In Charles law, this is the one that is constant. Okay? And then I think we also discussed other information that we can derive from the ideal gas law. We can determine the mass, we can determine the molar mass, and what's the other one? Density. By just playing around with the ideal gas equation. So if you want to get the mass and the molar mass, all you need to do is replace this one with this expression. And then you just play around. So this is where the math knowledge is needed. Okay? So if you want to get the mass, so you just use the math knowledge we're in. You multiply both sides by this. So why do you think we multiply these terms? Because we want to eliminate the terms that we have on this side. So we end up as mass equals to molar mass times the pressure and volume over RT. Now, if you want to get the molar mass, so if you're going to look at this, the molar mass usually goes here when we do a cross multiplication and we end up like that. So if you want to leave molar mass on each side, on one side, you divide both sides by PB. And you end up with this expression. Okay? And you can also derive when you have the molar mass expression here like this one, you can determine the density. Why? Because this one that is equals to your density. I don't know how they put it there, small d. So these are the things that you need to know.
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you always have to do it this way, or could you just manipulate the equations?
No, the way I do it is I manipulate the equation. Because as I told you, the most likely you'll just be given this expression, the PB equals to nRT. And it's up to you to manipulate them.
Can't you just
I'm
find?
just showing you here how you're going to derive all the other equations from this PB equals to nRT.
But if you're trying to find the molar mass, can't you just find N and then multiply it by the
Well,
molar mass?
yeah, you can do it that way. Okay, that is the longer way. If you are, we could say, compy on that, I'm not going to stop you from that. Because what I'm trying to train you here is to develop your mathematical skills. Okay? And what's the, what we call, if your math is suspect, what's the best way for you to do? You memorize them. But as I'm telling you now, in your exam, you will not be given this. You will not be given this one. All you'll be given is PV equals to nRT. Okay? That's why I'm trying to do all the the mathematical techniques that you need here to come up with the equation or formula that you need. So this is where we end up. So if this is your molar mass equals to density times R over T divided by P, if you want to put density on one side, so it will be molar mass times pressure over RT. So I think we end up with the 1.72 problem, the one that gives us 1.72. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to continue with the problem solving that we have. So this one, so you have here 500 ml plus containing a sample of octane. This is placed in a boiling water bath in Denver, where the atmospheric pressure is 634 millimeter mercury and water boils at 95 degrees Celsius. So the mass of the vapor required to fill the flask is 1.57. So what is the molar mass of your octane? And you're given here as a guide the empirical formula. So the knowledge that you have from chapter 3 is needed here. Okay? So aside from the molar mass, since you're given the empirical formula, you are also asked for the molecular formula. So if you're going to look at this, you try to see what are the one that is given. So what is given here? So we have this. What is this? Anyone?
Volume.
Okay, so that's the volume. And then we have this. This is your
temperature.
Temperature that you're going to convert to Kelvin. And then you have this one. This is your what? Pressure. Okay. And then you have this one, which is your mass. So the one that's being asked first is the molar mass. So maybe from our different derivation, we can have it like molar mass equals to, so if I'm not mistaken, you have the MRT PV, right? Because I can move it this way. Are they the same?
Yes.
Okay, so those two equations are the same because where did I get the D? D is the one that come up with you do this operation here. So all you need to do is just substitute the value that we have there. But make sure you're using the right unit. Okay, so what's the one that's right here? So we could say 1.57 grams, and then we divide it with 0.5. Why did I put 0.5 here? I have to convert this to liters. And then I have the R. So I can always use the 0.206 liter atmosphere K mole. Okay? And then, what's my temperature? Anyone? Is 95 my temperature? Anyone?
You need to change it to Kelvin.
Okay,
368.
Okay, so it is 368. Okay? And what else is missing? The pressure. Now the pressure, you have to convert it to atmosphere. So how do we do that? Anyone? How do we convert millimeter mercury to atmosphere? So you have that for every 1 atmosphere, you have 760 millimeter mercury. So you divide 634 with 760. And what do you get? What do you get?
Is it 0.834?
Okay. And then if you're going to look at the unit, you can cancel, liter, you can cancel atmosphere, you can cancel K, and you end up with the unit of grams per mole, which is the unit of the one that you're looking for. What do you get? Anyone?
0.0138.
No.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't make sense because this is a molar mass, so it should be a whole number.
Oh. Oh. Okay, never mind. 1 point. Nope, just kidding.
What do you get? Anyone?
One 13.7.
7.
115?
No, 113.
113.
113. So that would be 114. So your guide is, if you're asked for a molar mass, you cannot have a fraction because the lowest molar mass that you can have is hydrogen gas, which is 2. Okay. So that itself will give you, if you're right or wrong, if you get a fraction number. Now, this is just the first one. Okay. So I just I'm going to have a short break. Can you give me a 10-minute break?
Take all the time you need.
Yeah, I just need to do something.
You got it.
So maybe the next thing that you're going to do while I'm away is try to determine the molecular formula and the molar mass. Okay, I'll be back.
I'll miss you.
So there. Okay, so let's continue. Woo. So where are we? So 114. So it says there we have an empirical formula of C4H9 because the one being asked is what's the molecular formula? So we have an empirical formula. So what we're going to do, we need to determine first what's the empirical formula mass, which is just adding everything here, right? So 4 times 12 and then 9 times 1. So that would be equals to 4, 4, 4, 12, 24, 48. So that's equals to 57. Because what we're going to do is we need to determine the N, okay, which is just equal to molecular formula over empirical formula mass. Not molecular formula, molar mass. So we have here 114 over 57. So that is equals to 2. Now you might say, what's the N stands for? So the N just stands for whatever's your empirical formula, and then you multiply those number that you have there. So since it's 2, so you end up with C8H18. That's your molecular formula. Okay? Analyze. And I forgot to tell you that the calculation part for your third exam will be coming everything from this chapter, because you don't really have calculation in chapter 9 and chapter 10. And we only cover 9, 10, and 5 for your third exam. Okay? Now, how do we know if this is right? We can check this, okay, by getting the mass. So you're going to add everything there, and your answer should be equals to 114. So this is an application still of the ideal gas constant. Okay, so question before we go on stoichiometry and using gas volume. So we're now going to combine some elements of chapter 4 with the present chapter. Because the thing that we have discussed in chapter oh no, this is elements of chapter 3, not chapter 4. Okay, stoichiometry. So when we're talking about stoichiometry, we're looking at the quantitative relationship of a chemical equation. But this time, instead of using the grams, we're going to use the volume. Okay, so it says here, use the ideal gas law to find the moles from a given volume, pressure, and temperature, and vice versa. So we can say this is still an application of the ideal gas equation. And I have an example here. When we have 2-liter bottle of concentrated HCl was spilled, 1.2 kilogram of calcium carbonate was required to neutralize the spill. So what volume of carbon dioxide was released by the neutralization at 735 millimeter mercury and 20 degrees Celsius. So how are we going to solve this problem? So since we have here in the title of the topic as stoichiometry, what's the thing that you need to do first? Anyone?
Write the equation.
Huh?
Write the equation.
Okay, you write the equation. Okay, so you have to determine what's the equation in the first place. So we have here HCl reacting with calcium carbonate. And then it's going to produce, one of them is CO2. So what would be the other one? What are the other, we could say, products? If you're going to remember chapter 4. So I think that's where chapter 4 comes in. So this is a reaction that involves carbonate. So carbonate forms carbon dioxide, and the one that goes hand in hand with it, the water. And then what else? So you have a calcium here and a chloride there. Since you have 2 chloride and 2 waters here, H2, so that means you have that. So now we have the balance equation. So the next thing that we're going to do is, let us try what is being asked. So one that's being asked is the volume of carbon dioxide. Now, if you're going to look here, the one that is given is what? This one. Because you didn't have the concentration for the HCl, so that means you cannot get the moles of the HCl. But the one that you're given there is the 1.2 kilogram calcium carbonate, which you can get the moles. And then you might ask yourself, why do we need to get the moles of calcium carbonate? Anyone? Because the one that we need is the moles here. Because once we get the moles here, we can determine the volume because the other information are given. You can use it using the ideal gas equation. But first, you need to determine how much moles of carbon dioxide was produced in the first place. And the only information given to us for the reactant is the 1.2 kilogram calcium carbonate. So what does it mean? You need to determine the number of mass or the mass of the calcium carbonate. So you have here 1,200 divided by what? The molar mass of your calcium carbonate, which is, if I'm not mistaken, 100 grams per mole. So if you have that, how many moles do you have? Around 12?
12 moles. Yeah.
So you have 12 here. This is 1:1 mole ratio, so you also have 12 here, right? So that's the point that you're going to use now to determine your volume. Because what you have now, PB equals to nRT. So what you get here is?
But isn't it in kilograms? Shouldn't it
That's
be?
why I convert it to 1,200 grams.
Okay.
Right? The equivalent of 1.2 kilograms is 1,200 grams. I convert here. Okay? So, now that I have here, I can rearrange this one because the one that is being asked is the volume. So I can always divide both sides by pressure. So I have now there the 12 moles. And then I can still use the 0.08206 liter atmosphere K mole. And then I'm going to convert this to what? How many Kelvin is 20 degrees Celsius equivalent to?
293.
Okay, 293 Kelvin. And then divide everything by 735 millimeter mercury over 760 millimeter mercury per atmosphere, per 1 atmosphere. So if you're going to look at the units, cancel the one that you can cancel. Atmosphere, Kelvin. So you have there the units of liters. So what will be the volume there? How many liters? Anyone?
$298.4.
Okay, so you get there 298 liters. So question, because you might have one question in a PV equals nRT or derivative in your exam. Any question?
So on the other side, you always have to put something that will cancel them out.
As much as possible. I told you, whenever you have a calculation problem, what do you call that? Dimensional analysis is the one that will help you. So the way dimensional analysis work is the units will cancel out, leaving you with the units that you need. Okay. So let's go on mixture of gases. So usually, as I've told you earlier, when you mix gas, they seldom react with one another. Okay. If you mix gases at room temperature, they will remain whatever they are. But if you change the pressure and temperature, then that's another story. Okay. For instance, if you mix N2 with H2, usually they remain N2 and H2. But if you're going to increase the temperature and pressure, you can produce ammonia. So we're going to stay with the concept of a mixture. So we know mixture, they're just what? Physical mixing. Okay, there's no chemical reaction. So when gases mix with one another, what John Dalton found out is the gas would retain its own pressure. Okay, so he said in a mixture of unreactive gases, each gas acts as if it's the only gas in the mixture as far as pressure is concerned. So what does it mean? Okay, so a gas would have its own pressure, and then another gas would have its own pressure. When you mix them, each of their own pressure are retained. So the pressure that you have now for both gases will be the total pressure. Okay, so the way that we envision this concept here, so you have plus A here. So in plus A, what you have here, okay, is a gas that has a pressure of 152 millimeter mercury, and it's made up of helium. In another plus that's made up of hydrogen, you have 608 millimeter mercury. So that hydrogen exerts 608 millimeter mercury pressure. Now, when you transfer all of this helium gas to the one that contains the hydrogen, the new pressure that you have is just the summation of the respective pressure of each gas. So you have here 152 plus 608. So the total pressure that you have now is equals to 760 millimeter mercury. So that's the basis of John Dalton's statement. And he called it, okay, the law of partial pressure. So this is another natural law. Okay, so when we're talking about partial pressure, that is the pressure exerted by a particular gas in a mixture. Okay, so the John Dalton's law of partial pressure just say the sum of the partial pressures of all the different gases in the mixture is equal to the total pressure of the mixture. So whatever the pressure of each of the gas in a given mixture, the total pressure of all the gases in that mixture is just the sum of each partial pressure of the gas. Okay, so what does this mean? So if I have here 100 millimeter mercury, 200 millimeter mercury, 300 millimeter mercury, the total pressure that I have is just equals to what? If I have these numbers, what is my PT? Total pressure. Anyone? So I add 100, 200, 300, giving me a total pressure of 600 millimeter mercury. Okay. Now, how do we do it in a gas problem? So for instance here, a 100 ml sample of air exhaled from the lungs is analyzed and found to contain 0.083 grams of nitrogen, 0.0194 grams of oxygen, 0.0064 grams of carbon dioxide, and 0.0041 grams water vapor at 35 degrees Celsius. So what is the partial pressure of each component and the total pressure? So how do we solve this? We're not going to add all of this. Okay? What we're going to do is we need to get what is the pressure of each gas component. So what do we need to use? What are given here? What are the information given here? What does this represent? Anyone? What's 100 ml represent?
The volume.
Volume.
The volume. The 35 degrees Celsius, what does it represent?
Temperature.
The temperature. Okay? What else is given here? This one.
Masses.
So that's the mass of the respective gas. And from the what we call given gas, you can also get the smaller mass. So if you're going to look at this, you're still going to use the PV equals to nRT. But you're just going to get the pressure of each of them. So you need to get PN2, PO2, PCO2, okay, and PH2O. And the one that will be the same would always be what? The temperature, the volume, and the ideal gas constant. The one that will change is this N. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I can already get, okay, what's the equivalent value of this? So I have the 0.08206 times what's the temperature in what we call Kelvin. So 35 plus, that is equals to what? So 308. Because I can put, let's say, I try to put it for the first one. So 0.083 grams N2, and then divided by maybe 28 grams per mole. And then I can get the 0.08206 times 308. And then I divide it with, can I just put here 0.1? Because I convert it to liters. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. So oxygen would be what? 0.0194 divided by 32. CO2 would have 0.00640 divided by 44 grams. And then water would have 0.00441 divided by 18 grams. Because if I'm not mistaken, if I'm going to get this value here, which I'm going to put here, here, and here, this is the value that I get, 252.74. So all I do is I just multiply each of them there, and I'm going to get the corresponding pressure. And what do you think the unit of my pressure will be? So this is liter atmosphere K mole, and this is Kelvin. So if you're going to look at the unit, grams canceled, the moles is canceled, liter atmosphere K mole. So the one that is left is atmosphere. So try to calculate the first one here. What do you get? And then I'll give you the rest. What do you get here? 0.0830 times 0.08206 times 308 divided by 28 times 0.1.
I got 0.749.
How much?
0.749, so 0.75.
Okay, and then this one, I'll just give this to you. Because this is just a lot of calculation. I'm not going to get, usually if ever there's a question about this in the exam, it must be much a simpler calculation. What makes this a little bit complicated is you're given in grams and you need to convert this to atmosphere. So you're asked what's the partial pressure? These are the partial pressure. And what's the total pressure? You're just going to add all of them. And what would that be? If I give you these numbers, what will be the total pressure equal to?
1.0007.
Okay, so you could just put there as 1.00 atmosphere. Okay. So the next item that we have here, I think I'm going to give this for you to work on yourself, okay? Because I'm going to tell something about the one that I told you for those who are not doing well in class, how to do it. I think I already devised some way for that. So maybe I will ask this as one of the questions on that scheme that I'm going to tell you by the end of the class today. So the one that I want you to know is if you have gas or a mixture of gases, when you mix them together, the total pressure is just the summation of all the individual's gas partial pressure. That's the only thing that I want you to learn in this part of chapter 5. So it might just be a concept questions that will come up. If ever a calculation will come up, it's a much simpler calculation. Okay. So you may ask a question from this one: which gas exerts the most pressure? Which gas exerts the least pressure? So you can only answer a question like that if you have calculation, especially if it's not straightforward. Because I can give you a question like this: between gas A, B, and C, which gas exerts the most or the least pressure? Okay. So you can expect also questions like that. Because I have not what we could do the third exam yet. By next week, you will have an idea how the third exam would look like. Okay. So let's do this one. We're just going to discuss this. Usually when we have the lab, we do this lab. How are you going to collect gas over water? Okay, because most of the gases that we have, you often collect it over over water. And whenever you do that, there's always a mixture of gas and water vapor. What's the difference of water and water vapor? Anyone?
Water is a liquid, water vapor is a gas.
Very good. What else? The other difference that they have, since water vapor is a gas, it has pressure. Okay. Usually water, you don't have pressure. The one that exerts pressure is air. Okay. Whenever there is an air, okay, what we call exert pressure. The first thing that you will discuss with me in Gen Chem 2 is this called vapor pressure. But if you're going to look at the vapor pressure, this is just the same as what? Air pressure. The only difference that we call it a vapor pressure, because usually vapor is formed whenever you have the liquid component, right? So whenever there's a transition from the liquid to the gas phase, the gas is what we call vapor. So when you said here, the result is a mixture of the gas and water vapor, that means the pressure that you have there is not only the pressure of the gas, but also the pressure of the water in the gas form. So as mentioned here, the total pressure is equal to the sum of the gas pressure. So the gas pressure is the gas that you have, and the vapor pressure of water. So water here is in the gas form, which is your water vapor. Okay, and the partial pressure of water depends only on the temperature and is known. I'm not sure if the table 6 here is given, like this one. So you're going to look at here that as the temperature increases, the pressure also increases. And you will learn more about this in Gen Chem 2. And this concept that we have here, this is the reason why our planet is problematic lately. Okay, so if you're going to know what is that, maybe you enroll with me with Gen Chem 2, because we will explain that why we have this problem. And the main reason that is just the principle behind this one. As the temperature increases, the pressure also increases. Okay, and we what we call, we didn't really experience it directly, but lately the United States experienced them. So the way that we're going to do it here, they follow the Dalton's law for partial pressure. So you only involve this if you're doing an experiment wherein you collect gas over water. So what does it mean? The gas that you have, the pressure that you measured there, it's not solely coming from your gas. Okay, there's a contribution coming from the water vapor because you did it, okay, with water. So for instance here, if we react zinc with HCl, it produces hydrogen gas according to the following reaction. So if you look at this, it illustrates how the experiment is being done. Because what you have there, when you collect this one, it's not only hydrogen that's there. You also have some water. So this is how the reaction happened. So you drop HCl there that contains zinc, and what they do, they will generate hydrogen gas. But when they generate the hydrogen gas, usually they have water there. So what happened? When the gas is generated, it's going to displace the water. So you can measure directly the volume of the gas that was produced. How do you do that? So usually you see the bubbles. So that bubbles represents the volume of the gas. Now that corresponding bubbles, it also gives you this pressure. Now, if you're going to look at the effect of the vapor pressure, it's really small. Okay, so if you have the pressure of the hydrogen equal to 752 and the partial pressure of water vapor as 17, so you're going to get around what? What's the total pressure? 767. No, I don't think it's that. The way that you're going to do is, that's the total pressure that you have, 767 millimeter mercury. Okay. Now, let's try to look at some values that we have here. So try to see when the gas collection tube is adjusted, you have a barometric pressure of 769. So that's the total pressure in the reading. And the total gas pressure equals the sum of the partial pressure of hydrogen and the vapor pressure of water. I think this is 769. This is my fault. 2 plus 7. Okay. Now, what can happen here? So this is your total pressure. And based on the table here, 19 degrees Celsius, that's the corresponding partial pressure of water. So from that, you can get what's the partial pressure of your hydrogen. Why? Because you're going to use that in solving problems like this one. So you prepare nitrogen gas by heating ammonium nitrate. Okay. So if you collect the nitrogen over water at 23 degrees Celsius and 727 millimeter mercury, how many liters of gas would you obtain from 5.68 grams ammonium nitrate? So what are we going to do here? So this is still the same as stoichiometry and the volume of gas. So what we're going to determine here is how many liters of gas would you obtain from this. So you have this, and you need to get, which will I need to get? Nitrogen or water? Anyone?
Nitrogen.
Okay, nitrogen. Okay, so what are we going to do? What's the first thing for me to do? If I have a problem like this, where do I start? So I'm going to look for this one. And then from that, I'm going to get to the liters. But before I start here, where is my, what we call starting point? I can start here. Why? I'm given this one. So I can start with 5.68 grams ammonium nitrite. And then I multiply it with, for every 1 mole of ammonium nitrite, I have how many grams of ammonium nitrite? (14) plus 4, 18, plus 14, plus 16 plus 16. So I have around 64, right?
Yeah.
You follow there? And then all I know, for every, based on the equation, for every 1 mole of my ammonium nitrite, I have 1 mole of N2. Because I just want to get first the mole of N2. And what is it that equal to? Anyone? Try to do the calculation. What do you get?
0.089.
So you get point 0.08 before you round it up.
0.0887.
How many 8?
2.
Like that?
Yeah.
So 0.0887. Everyone got that?
Yes.
Yep.
Is it 0.0 or I Is it 0.8 or 0.088?
0.088 I got.
How about the others?
The same.
So there's a 0 like that?
Yes.
Yes.
0.68 divided by 64. Okay. I think it's all 8 because 8875. Or I can just put. Okay. So that's the moles of your N2. Now the one being asked is liters. Okay. So I start PB equals to nRT. So I need to do it in this form. Now the question, what will be the pressure that I'm going to use? Will it be the 727 or I have to adjust it depending on the setup that we have? The setup that we have is this. Collected nitrogen over water. So when you have that word, that means this represents the total pressure, not the partial pressure of nitrogen. So what do? We go to the table and find the corresponding pressure of your water. And then we're going to subtract it from 727. 21 point, is that 21.1? What do we have there? 21.1. So what we have there is around 706, right? We can just round it up. And that's the one that we're going to use here. It only happens if the setup mentions that the gas was collected over water. So we're going to use the 0.08875 mole. And then this is what? 0.08206 liter atmosphere K mole. And then the temperature will be converted to Kelvin. So that is equals to what? Anyone? What is that equal to? So 23, when you convert to Kelvin, that is equals to 296. And you divide it with 706 millimeter mercury, where you're going to convert it to atmosphere. So you cancel out the one that you can cancel out. Atmosphere, atmosphere, mole, mole, Kelvin, Kelvin. So what will be your answer here in liters?
$2.32 liters.
2.32 liters. Very good. So question, before we end the PB equals to nRT. Question, before we go with kinetic molecular theory. Question? So the next thing that we're going to discuss is KMT. So if you recall, in the first part, or in our, what we say, chapter 1, okay, we discuss about these laws. Okay, so when we're talking about law or laws, they tell us what happens in nature. And what we have discussed so far are the different gas laws, right? So each of the gas laws that we have discussed tells us what is observed under certain condition. Pressure is indirectly proportional to volume. Temperature is directly proportional to volume. So those are the laws. Now, why are these laws observed? Why does we observe this condition? Why do we observe this thing? Why is pressure directly proportional or indirectly proportional to volume? Why is temperature directly proportional to volume? So what we're going to do now is we need to have a theory to explain the observations that we have. Okay, so the thing that they have developed is the so-called kinetic molecular theory, known as the KMT. And this is developed not by chemists, but by physicists, based on the assumption that the gas consists of molecules in constant random motion. Okay, now you may ask yourself, why do gas behave like what they said, a constant random motion? What allowed them to have a constant random motion? Anyone?
Is it Brownian movement?
Is it the Brownian movement? No, we stick to our definition of the solid, liquid, gas before.
It has an indefinite shape and volume.
Okay, because it has an indefinite shape and volume. So since it has large space in between them, they can always move at constant random motion. There's no intermolecular forces of attraction in gases. That's another condition why you have a constant random motion. Liquid and solid, you have intermolecular forces of attraction. If you're going to look at the syllabus that we have, I don't know if you have wondered, why is it that we have a chapter about the gases, but we don't have a chapter about liquid and solids? You can check the syllabus that we have. Okay? Why is it that we only discuss the gas here? Are the gas the only important physical state compared to the liquids and solid? The answer for you to that is the liquid and the solids chapter can be found in Gen Chem 2. That's the first chapter that you're going to discuss in Chem 112. Okay? So the gases is special because it doesn't have a definite shape and a definite volume, so no intermolecular forces of attraction will hold them together. So they kept in moving. They keep themselves in constant random motion. So the kinetic molecular theory, this is a theory, okay, that looks on the behavior of the gases. So it's a model that explains why gas behave the way they behave. Then, since it's a constant random motion, okay, the word itself, their motion, so that means you have a kinetic energy that is involved there. Kinetic energy is what? Energy in motion, or the energy associated for those in motion. Why is it in motion? Because you can see here mass times velocity. When can you see velocity? Can you observe velocity? You're standing still like a solid. Think about it. You only observe velocity if you're moving. Okay? So kinetic energy, this is the formula. And if you're going to look at the formula, it is dependent on the mass and velocity. Now, what does this KMT tells us? There are several statements, okay, that look on the behavior of the gases. And that's the one that we're going to talk today. Okay? So the first statement that we have here, gases are composed of molecules whose sizes are negligible. So what does it mean? Whether you have a big molecule or a small molecule, as long as your gases, as long as you're in gas form, okay, it doesn't matter. The only time it will get matter later on is in their movement. But if you're going to look at all the gases, they're composed of molecules whose sizes are negligible. Okay? And then molecules move randomly in straight lines in all directions and at various speeds. So this is where they move at various speeds. So what does this mean? If the molecules are the same, their speed might be the same. But if one is heavier than the other, so one will be slower or faster than the other. But whatever the size that they have and the speeds that will result from the size, they will always move at random, straight line, as they call it. And as I have mentioned to you, the forces of attraction or repulsion between two molecules in a gas are very weak. They don't exist. Except when they collide or when the molecules collide. But there's a condition on that. Okay? The conditions on that is the fourth statement. When molecules collide with each other, they have an elastic collision. So what does elastic condition means? This is explained by this slide. So when you have an elastic condition, this is one in which no kinetic energy is lost. The collision on the left causes the ball on the right to swing the same height as the ball of the left had initially, with essentially no loss of kinetic energy. So if you put it there, okay, it will have the same height as this. So what happened here? There's just a transfer of energy. So what do we say here? Energy is conserved. Okay? So you expect it when the molecules collide. And the last statement that we have there, the average kinetic energy of a molecule is proportional to the absolute temperature. So what does this mean? The higher the molecule, the slower or the faster the movement of gases? Anyone?
The faster.
Okay. So the higher the molecule, the faster it is. The higher the temperature, the faster is the movement. In fact, they said temperature is a measure of the kinetic energy. Okay. We could say the average kinetic energy of the molecules is proportional to the absolute temperature. Now, if we're going to look at this in PB equals nRT, how can we relate that to PB equals nRT? So we have PB equals to nRT. So let's see if we can derive each of the gas law from the postulates. Where do you think we can relate pressure among the statements that we have here? When do you have pressure? So let's say you have a box or a container, and then you have there the gases. So when do you think pressure happened? Anyone? When do you think the pressure happened? In your real life, when do you use pressure?
When you cook.
When do you hear the term apply pressure on it?
Like when you
When you
press
give her-
on a brake or something.
Okay, one by one. When do you hear the term apply pressure to it?
Well, if somebody's bleeding, you apply pressure to it to stop
Yeah.
the bleeding.
Sometimes if there's a hole and you try to prevent something from coming out, right? So if you're going to look at the KMT, if you're talking about pressure, it has something to do with the word that we have here is this one, collision. The frequency of collision. So what does it mean? When do they collide? Whether they collide with one another or they collide with the wall. So which do you think there is the pressure? The one when they collide with one another, or when they collide with the wall?
When they collide with the wall.
When they collide with the wall. Okay? And that pressure can also be affected, aside from the collision with the wall, with what? What other terms that we can use here that we can, what we could relate to it? Force, right? How do we define pressure? Pressure is equals to force per area. So the pressure that we have there is just synonymous to the frequency of the collision times the force, the average force that you have. Okay? So every what we call molecule, they have their own force. So the more that they collide to the wall, what do you think happened? The higher will be the pressure. Does that make sense? Because if you're going to look at this, the average force depends on the mass of the molecule and its speed, because that's the average force, that's the average kinetic energy. Okay? So that means it depends on the momentum. So the frequency of the collision is proportional to the average speed and the number of the molecules. So we could say it's inversely proportional to your volume. Remember the relationship between pressure and volume? Okay. So they are indirectly proportional. So if the frequency of collision is proportional to the average speed and the number of molecules, okay, it is inversely proportional to the volume. Now, if you rearrange the relationship that we can come up, let's say, as I have told you, pressure is equals to frequency collision and average force. So that would be, I can put it here. I'm just trying to show you how this postulate is related to PB and RT. So if you're going to look at this, this is the average speed. Okay, and then inversely proportional to the volume, proportional to the number of the molecules, which is n. Now, what is mu here? That is your momentum. Okay? So if you're going to simplify it, you can do it like this. And based on this, you can get the average kinetic energy of the molecule, which is your mass and average speed. So you end up here, the PB is proportional to the average kinetic energy. Because what will happen, so you have here the PB, this other side here can become your NT. And you know, if you set aside it like this one, you have your ideal gas constant. I'm just trying to relate to you the postulates, the different statements that we have here about KMT with PB equals to nRT. And what do we get from here? The molecular speed. Because according to the kinetic molecular theory, the molecular speed vary over a wide range of values. And if we're going to look at the distribution, it depends on temperature. So the way that we look at it, as you increase the temperature, it also increases your molecular speed. So the typical equation that is related to the molecular speed is this so-called root mean squared. So look where it is dependent. It is dependent on the temperature, which is here, and the molar mass. Now, I ask you the question, does that make sense? That the molecular speed depends on the temperature and indirectly dependent on the molar. Does it make sense? So what does it tell us? If speed is directly dependent on temperature, as the temperature increases, what happened to the speed? Will it increase or decrease?
Increase.
Eh? Increase, because I just heard increase. Now, how about molecular mass? If the molecular mass increases, what happened to the speed?
Decreases.
Is it increase or decrease?
Decreases.
It decreases. What does it mean? The heavier ones are what? Faster or slower?
Slower.
Slower. Okay, that's what it means. But the way that they look at this is root mean square. You might say, why root mean square? Because you're using here the square root of 3 times R times T over the molar mass. And the value that you have here usually depends. The R that we use here is not 0.08206. It's the other one. Because we have energetic stuff here. And the molar mass that we have here is not grams per mole. We use it in terms of kilograms per mole. Okay? If you want to look how the calculation is being done, we can do this thing. What is the RMS squared speed of carbon dioxide molecules? So we have here U RMS equals to 3RT. Now, what do we need to remember here? The temperature, okay, and the molar mass. Now, the unit that we have here is not the typical unit that we usually use, especially for the molar mass. The temperature, fine. But the R is also different. We use 8.314, but we look at the units that is being used. You know, 8.314 is joules. So if we're going to look at the number that we have here, so I have a 3, and then I had a 8.3145 kilogram meters squared per second squared. So this is just the joules, okay, over K mole. So usually joules K mole, that's your R. And then the temperature, what's the Kelvin of 23?
296.
296 Kelvin. And then the molar mass that we have here, instead of using the 44, we're going to convert it to this one. Why do I need to use it like this one? Why do you think I use the kilogram instead of the gram? Anyone? It has something to do with this unit here. Because I will cancel it out. What else can I cancel? I can cancel the K. I can cancel the mole. So I have here the answer in the square root of meters squared per second squared. So you might now know why it's a square root. Because if you get the square root of m squared over s squared, you have what unit? Meters per second.
Over S.
Right? Which is a unit of
Speed.
So what's the number that you get if I put this one? We can do the step by step here. The one that without the square root yet. What's the number that you get? So this is 296, okay? So what do you get? Anyone? So if I do this one, 3 times 8.3145 times 296 divided by 0.04401, I get around 1.68 times 10 to the, what do you get? 3 times 8.3145 times 296 divided by 0.04401, 1.68 times 10 to the negative 5, to the 5, not negative 5, just to the 5. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get its square root. So I'm going to get around this value, 4.1 times 10 to the 2, or 410 meters per second.
There.
I have a question, Professor.
Okay.
How did you get the 10 meters per second? I know how you got the 1.7 something, but
I get the square root of that. So the way I do is get the square root of 1.7 times 10 to the 5, and you will get around 410. So a unit here, the square root of That's the one that will give me that value. Okay, before I say something.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to turn off the recording, so you need to listen.